Around 200 protests took place across the country over the weekend, attended by over 100,000 people. As many as 137,500 people have now attended Black Lives Matter's protests across the UK. While the majority were peaceful, a lawless minority of protesters have regrettably turned to violence. The worst violence flared in London on Saturday evening, with missiles and flares being thrown at police officers outside Downing Street. Officers in protective equipment were deployed to arrest the culprits and to clear the area. At least 35 officers have now been injured during the protests in the capital. I salute their bravery and wish them a swift recovery. The thugs and criminals responsible are already being brought to justice. This is a fluid situation, Madam Deputy Speaker, but as of this morning, the total number of arrests stood at 135. As the ugly tally of officer assault shows, Madam Deputy Speaker, some protesters regrettably turned to violent and abusive behaviour at the weekend. This hooliganism is utterly indefensible. There is no justification for it. There is no excuse for pelting flares at brave officers, throwing bikes at police horses, attempting to disrespect the cenotaph, or vandalising the statue of Winston Churchill, one of the greatest protectors of our freedoms who has ever lived. It is not for mobs to tear down statues and cause criminal damage in our streets, and it is not acceptable for thugs to racially abuse black police officers for doing their jobs. The criminals responsible for these unlawful and reckless acts are betraying the very cause that they purport to serve. These protests are about injustice, but by attacking our courageous police, they are acting in a wholly unjust way. When I became Home Secretary, I vowed to back the police. I said that I would stand with the brave men and women of our police and security services and against the criminals. And I stand by that today, proudly and without apology. Because as we saw at the weekend, we ask our frontline police officers to do the most difficult of jobs, to run towards danger, to ensure that we are not in danger, to put their own lives on the line to protect the public, to uphold the rule of law and the rights of individuals against the disorder that we have seen in recent days. By doing this, the police in our country give us all the very security we need to live our lives as we choose. That is an essential part of our freedom. Because violence, disorder and crime, it blights communities and society as a whole. So the police need to know that they have a Prime Minister, a Home Secretary and a government that stands with them, and that we will give them the tools and powers and the resources they need to keep us safe. And they do. Police funding has had its biggest uplift in a decade, increasing by over £1 billion. And we are recruiting an additional 20,000 police officers to keep our streets and our country safe. They all have my full support in upholding the rule of law and in tackling violence, vandalism and disorderly criminal behaviour. And I could not be clearer that I want to see the violent minority responsible arrested and brought to justice. Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree with the many peaceful protesters that racism has absolutely no place in our society. Black lives matter, but police brutality in the United States is no excuse for the violence against our brave police officers at home. So to the quiet, law-abiding majority who are appalled by this violence and have continued to live their lives within the rules, I hear you. To the police who have been subject to the most dreadful abuse, you have my full backing as you act proportionately, fairly and courageously to maintain law and order. And to the criminal minority who have subverted this cause with their thuggery, I simply say this: your behaviour is shameful and you will face justice. I commend this statement to the House.